Well, I want to welcome everybody to the Friday afternoon Sex and Healing Relationship Interactive Prodependence webinar. So today's topic is what I've entitled D-Day. What's been showing up this past week, not only in group, but also in my office, is the fact that women throughout their healing journey, whether it's what begins their healing journey in that initial disclosure or discovery, which is why it's D-Day, or if it happens throughout their recovery journey, it has an impact upon the betrayed partner. So before I kind of get into the details of what I'm talking about today, I want to review a couple of concepts around prodependence so that you understand what we're talking about. First of all, what I love about the prodependence model is that it's a strength-based, attachment-focused approach to recovery for the betrayed partner. So it acknowledges the trauma and the inherent dysfunction that occurs. So every time you go into crisis, right, when you're living with an addict, we don't look at that as there's a problem with you. It's that it's going to happen when you're in close relationship with somebody who has an addiction. I love prodependence because it really does assist the betrayed partner in addressing each crisis in the healthiest, least shaming way. So today we're going to kind of talk about the crisis that comes up when there's discovery or there's disclosure or both. So like I said, this past week, I've worked with somebody who came to me and they had just first learned about their partner's porn addiction. And then I also had some new group members coming in this past week where they talked about their disclosures and discovery as we were kind of getting to know each other. And it had occurred numerous times throughout their healing journey. So I'm addressing all of these types of women because this is a reality that it's going to happen. And what do you do when there's more discovery or more disclosure? So when we have a discovery or our betrayed partner discloses something, there's an immediate disconnection and there's feelings of devastation. There's a traumatic stress reaction in that moment. So what happens is the brain turns on specific parts of the brain. And so the brain begins operating in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. So then, as a result of that, the betrayed partner starts to experiencing a free fall of uncomfortable emotions and feelings and thoughts. It's like a whirlwind. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you as the betrayed partner when this happens. It just means that in that moment, there's a disconnection to an attachment that you thought was safe and secure. So you're having a painful response to a negative situation, and this response is very normal. So just think about all the possible stress reaction type responses you can have. And it's everything from dizziness to sweating to irritability to anger to defensiveness to the inability to concentrate. I remember the tunnel vision, the heart rate, the feeling of panic. I mean, there is a huge list of those. And I encourage you to find a reputable source, your therapist, your group leaders, your support groups, if you don't understand what your body does when you have that brain reaction due to the stress of discovery or disclosure, because it's going to help you in knowing how to get yourself grounded and to get yourself feeling settled again. So let's talk about just briefly what I would call unhealthy disclosures. The first one is what I call the drive-by disclosure. So with the drive-by disclosure, this is where the betrayed partner all of a sudden is in a situation, usually where whatever's being disclosed cannot be discussed adequately. So the addict partner will reveal a secret. They do it at inconvenient times. And so the betrayed partner is just caught in the whirlwind and can't process what's happening to her or him. And the addict partner is very vague and incomplete with the information provided. So it's like you're left hanging. The second one is the dump. And so this one showed up this week. And that was the betrayed partner who all of a sudden, the addict partner wants to get everything out that they've ever held on to. So they begin to share all about their behaviors and they go into lots of detail, and they take a lot of time, and they might even stray off topic at times, and they might get dramatic at times, and it's very long and drawn out, all of the explanations that the addict partner gives. Sometimes within that, the addict partner will also begin to promise things and commit to things. And for the betrayed partner in that moment, it doesn't seem real. It feels very hollow. It doesn't feel genuine. The next one is the staggered, which is the death by 1,000 cuts. Now, I see this happen sometimes even with betrayed partners who are looking for discovery, right? I need to know, either I've got an intuitive sense that something's off, or I have found a piece of information that's made me think there's something more going on. So with this, the addict partner is very resistant at times. And when they do share or they do disclose, they usually omit details. They keep changing their story over time. And believe me, a betrayed partner, because they've got that heightened sense, they're keeping track of all the details because their brain's trying to make sense of what's happened in the past and what's currently happening. So they're trying to take those pieces of the puzzle and put them all together so things start to make sense for them. So oftentimes the betrayed partner's conversations are sporadic, they're incomplete, they contradict themselves. It's very fragmented, very confusing. So the partner is really left time and time and time again, right, with this activated brain response, because this has thrown them into stress and into their betrayal trauma. The other one is what I call the mystery disclosure. So with this, the addict partner provides very vague information about past behaviors. The betrayed partner has a hard time pinning them down to specifics. Again, they're not good at consistently talking. They're sporadic. You almost have to pin them down. They minimize their past behaviors, and they give the impression to the betrayed partner that they haven't resolved the things they've done in the past. It's still not quite clear to them everything that's going on. So it's like the betrayed partner is constantly in the dark. The other one that happens is the interrogation. So this often happens when the betrayed partner finds something or senses something. So the betrayed partners report to me that by sensing something, it's either they've got a gut feeling, or they're noticing their addict partner's behaviors are off. They're just sensing that things aren't quite right. And they're very intuitive once they're in recovery and they're becoming aware of things that are happening. So what will happen is the betrayed partner will begin to ask repetitive questions. And oftentimes they will bring into the interrogation facts that only they know about, because they're trying to see how truthful the addict partner is. So they'll bring this evidence, and sometimes if the addict partner isn't forthcoming, they will present the evidence. So then we get into a cycle where the addict partner only discloses what evidence is brought into the conversation. And so it's this tug and pull, and it feels like the burden of proof, rather than being on the addict partner, it shifts to the betrayed partner. And the betrayed partner is the one that takes on the responsibility of trying to get all the information and getting the addict partner to disclose. So you can see that all of those situations and those scenarios, along with any discovery, where you find out for the first time that your partner has had a porn or sex addiction, all of those are going to throw you into a crisis. So here's what happens on a D-Day. First of all, in that moment where you receive the information, the body begins to feel threatened. Then as a result, the brain engages. So questions start. I'm starting to wonder, gosh, did he lie to me? Can I trust him? What's going on? What should I do? And once the brain engages, then it's going to respond. And like I said earlier, it's going to go into fight, flight, or freeze. Most often it's in fight mode. Now, as a result of this, many times the betrayed partner will start internalizing the situation. So they turn the problem on themselves, especially in that initial discovery and disclosure. They start thinking thoughts like, what's wrong with me? Did I contribute to this? How could I not know? I'm so stupid. I feel so ashamed for what my partner's done. Is it because I'm not skinny enough, pretty enough, sexual enough. And so they begin to make it about themselves. And we're going to talk in a moment about how to step out of that and not internalize it. The other thing that you do when your brain's in this situation, in this state, is oftentimes you will isolate. You feel so overwhelmed because at that point, you don't know who you can really trust. You were supposed to be trusting your partner, and they've proven to be untrustworthy. And so now you don't even know what friends or families to turn to because you don't know how they're going to react to the information you bring to them. So it becomes very lonely for the betrayed partner. And then the other thing that occurs is as a result of the isolation, the betrayed partner starts to avoid. So you're going to avoid situations, you pull away from others you used to be close to because you just don't know how to manage what's going on. So you're in crisis and there's chaos all around you. And the three pillars of what we focus on in our recovery work at Family Strategies is, first of all, we work on emotional regulation. So we want to really help you in that crisis to feel stabilized. In a moment, we're going to talk about how that fits into some of the steps you can take when there is a D-Day. The other thing is there's got to be consistent self-care. So in the early days of recovery, I encourage the betrayed partners I work with to find what works for you. Create a routine and rituals in your life that include self-care, and self-care has got to be of high importance. It's really interesting. This last week in my group, we went around and shared with the new members what has been most valuable for you in the program in your own healing journey. And 3 of the 8 members said learning self-care has probably been the most valuable. And these women happened to have children and their mothers, and they had never thought that self-care was that important. And now they recognize that if they're not doing that consistent self-care, that they're not managing life from day to day, just the normal routine of things, but as things come up that are very difficult in their recovery journey. The next one is you've got to have social connections. That's when I've got somebody who comes in and sees me, and the only person that they're connecting to for their support and in their recovery is the partner who's betrayed them, the addict partner. Then recovery is going to be very difficult. So one of the first things I do is we've got to find you a support system. We've got to get you connected with people because we co-regulate when we are with other people. And I'm talking about when we're in betrayal trauma, it's those that are healthy, those that understand what you're going through and have empathy. And particularly, we're going to talk about in a moment, those that have the qualifications to give you the type of support you need. Oftentimes, I will have new clients that come in and they've been seeing other therapists for betrayal trauma recovery. And their therapists aren't specialized in those areas. And what I'm finding is that when we have discovery and disclosure initially, one of the quickest, best things you can do for yourself is to find the right people to connect to. And they have expressed frustration that they had to experience a lot of extra pain as a result of past experiences in a counselor's office. Okay, so what tools can you use when you have a D-Day? When there's discovery, there's additional disclosure. So in the early days, when you have discovery and disclosure, I encourage my clients to learn all they can about recovery from betrayal trauma. So this is really important. It's going to help you understand why you're reacting like you are and what steps you can take so you can begin to feel better. I love the concept of prodependence and putting hope into the equation of helping somebody get out of a crisis. Everybody needs something to hold on to when they're in the middle of a crisis. It's kind of like the life vest that you need to put on to help you realize that while you're navigating these really rough waters, that there's hope that eventually the waters are going to calm down. And I always needed that in my own betrayal trauma recovery, is I needed somebody to offer me hope so I knew that life would get better. You need to understand too about prodependence and its strength-based model and how it's attachment focused. Makes a huge difference Again, I've had clients even recently share with me that initially, a few years back in their recovery journey, they were told that they were part of the problem and that they contributed to it. And they're still trying to recover from it as they come in and see me even now. So I love the fact that, everything as a betrayed partner we do, it's because we love the addict partner and we want to make sure that they are safe and secure so that we can move towards them. As you get to know about betrayal trauma, you'll also be able to understand the next steps you need to take. So seeking integrity and sex and healing relationship, those are great resources, great places to go. Looking up CSATs in your area, certified sex addiction therapists, so you can actually reach out to people to get information as well. There's some great podcasts. Rob Weiss has a great podcast where you can learn instantly, all about betrayal trauma. So I encourage those who are experiencing betrayal trauma to find all the information they can on Prodependence. And you can even read Rob Weiss's book on Prodependence as well. The next thing you need to do is you've got to begin using grounding tools immediately. So whenever there's discovery or additional disclosure. So as you're a little bit further in your journey, you will understand what stabilizing tools are. And stabilizing tools are the things I do to help me get back into that right part of my brain. So I'm back into the prefrontal cortex and I'm back in logic and reasoning. I start to feel better. I'm back in my body. So it's simple things from breathing to even going out and going for a walk. It's also the 5 senses exercise where you're identifying 5 things you see, 4 things you feel with your physical body, 3 things you hear, 2 things you smell, 1 thing you taste. It's a really great way to get back into your body. So I tell my clients, figure out what are your top 5 stabilizing tools and just get really good at those. And if you don't have 5, start with 1 or 2 and just keep adding. It's really important. You've got to implement self-care in that moment. So you've got to start thinking about, I'm in crisis right now. I know I've got to eat. I've got to drink. I need to do my best at sleeping. I've got to stay with my routine so that I'm staying in my body in the moment and meeting my own needs. And if you need to, you might need to take a time out from the addict partner in that moment so that you can get yourself grounded. And I tell my clients often, put yourself in time out. Tell your family, tell the addict partner, I've got to put myself in time out for a moment so that I can get grounded again and I can start to feel better before I move forward. Okay, the next one is to reach out for support and getting assistance so that you can have emotional regulation. So don't isolate. Make sure that you reach out, you talk it out with somebody, again, somebody who's healthy, somebody who understands it from the Prodependence lens. I love it when my group come in each week and they go, oh yeah, we kind of process together a situation that came up for so-and-so. And so we don't need to do it in group today. And it's just wonderful, which means that they're there supporting each other. So we have to reach out. Like I've mentioned before, find that qualified therapist. I'm partial to CSATs because we have a very structured approach to how we can help heal. I'm also very biased towards Prodependence because to me, it makes sense and I see it working as it's applied to all the betrayed partners' lives that I'm working with. Also find people that are trustworthy, people that you can share your secrets with and they stay with them. And then get into a group. And I apologize if you hear my yard people in the background because they usually come on Wednesdays, but today, of course, they decided to come on Friday. So anyway, next point, always keep in mind that your partner's addiction is not your fault. So remember, the addict has to figure out the source of their own addiction. Oftentimes it's from shame or pain or other underlying traumas, and it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with the betrayed partner's deficiencies, the mistakes that they've made, or who they are. So you might have to really be consistent in reminding yourself that this addiction is not about me. It's about my partner's addiction, and it's his to figure out how to recover from. And we're willing to support. but we don't have to take it on as we're the cause. Do your best not to internalize. Okay, so how do we not internalize? Here's some ideas. First of all, after you take time and you get grounded, let's do some thinking. So you want to sit down rather than confronting the partner right away. I want you to take some time once you're grounded to get quiet and start thinking. So slow the process down a little bit. Reach out for healthy support if you need to. And then the next step is write down your concerns and any questions that you have. So once you're talking it through with your support person, oftentimes you start to see connection. You start to understand things better. So before you have any discussion, you want to prepare for it. So sit down and look at some of the questions. For example, it might be, how many times are you watching pornography right now? Where are you doing it? How long have you been doing it? For some of the betrayed partners, they're afraid to ask those questions in the initial days. They're worried that it's going to make the disconnection even worse, but yet they need to have that information. And it's best if you can do it as grounded as possible, which is very, very difficult in the early days. So you want to be able to bring your concerns as a betrayed partner to the table so that you don't have all those lingering thoughts and those fears, because that's going to contribute to the crisis you're experiencing. Then the next step is find a good time to talk. So it's a sensitive topic when you're talking with the addict about their addiction, whether it's drugs or sex or porn. It's very, very difficult because remember, the addict is dealing with their own shame and some of them their own denial. And some of them are starting to take accountability, but you never know, maybe as a betrayed partner, what you're going to be experiencing in the moment with the addict partner. So choose an intentional time to visit. My recommendation is that you're also very selective in the location you talk about things. So I'll tell my clients, if you can avoid it, then don't do it in the bedroom. I know privacy is an issue, but if you're going to be in your bedroom, then bring in chairs to sit in. Don't sit on the bed to talk about it. So we're going to try to put us in a spot where we can stay more grounded. In some places where you have a lot of privacy, you can do it at the kitchen table. So we're kind of sitting down, feet on the ground. I can stay grounded. Schedule a time, a specific time. And when you do meet, make sure that you are well fed and well rested. A lot of couples who are working with addictions try to have some of their most difficult conversations after the sun goes down and typically late at night. And your chances of going limbic are far greater, especially if you're not well rested or well fed, okay? And as I've mentioned before, if you are a betrayed partner and you're trying to sort things out, whether it's the initial discovery disclosure or it's one that's come up while you're healing, sit down and journal it. Journal what's going on. And so I love the talking boundary. I use that all the time with my group members and my clients. And so just write down, what are you seeing and what are you hearing, right? Whatever came up in that moment that is you're concerned about, write down the data. Number 2, then share your thoughts about that. So that would look like, well, when I think about what I saw and what I heard, right, I started telling myself this and this and this. So for example, the betrayed partner might be saying, I start telling myself that you're never going to get better and that I'm responsible for doing your recovery. And another thought I have is that our marriage isn't going to work. And then I start thinking about the future and being all alone. And then the third step is, and it makes me feel, so we talk about our feelings, it makes me feel so alone and so frightened because I want to be connected to you. I want us to work. I want to get to feeling better. And then the fourth step is, we've got to express as a betrayed partner the boundary or the need that you have. So what I need right now is to hear how you're going to be doing your recovery. Or what I need moving forward is, if you're going to have information to disclose to me, please wait until we have our formal therapeutic disclosure so I can work on staying grounded in the moment. My last really brief thing I want to share is the fact that you've got to prepare for a recovery that is a journey and not a destination. It does take time, and that's unfortunate. And that comes up often in my groups and in my office. And the fact that it feels like it's taking a lot of time. But what I do see, and I want to offer hope and give you that life vest, and that is that once you're in the right and type of recovery and you're receiving the right help, if you're willing to do the work, I see betrayed partners regulate very, very quickly and grow very, very fast. And they all inevitably get to a point where they say, gosh, I'm just learning stuff I can use in everyday life. And they get to a place where they know they can handle whatever comes their way. So I hope this is helpful, because I do believe that throughout your healing journey as a betrayed partner, you are always going to have disclosures. You're always going to you may possibly have discoveries. So that's it for today.
Thank you so much, Debbie. If you have questions, type them into the Q&A feature. I earlier today, excuse me, I had my level 3 sex addiction online work group guys, and we were going over this exact ground, except when I teach it to the addicts, I'm teaching that what I want them to understand is where their partner is coming from. And I try to use the prodependent lens instead of, say, thinking your partner is enmeshed and controlling. Your partner is caring and wants to help you recover. I mean, it's just a kind of a flip from this codependency language, which is very blaming and shaming of the betrayed partner. And a lot of my addicts are stuck in that because they've been very busy blaming the betrayed partner for all the things that have happened that are not the betrayed partner's fault. So getting them to flip to, your betrayed partner might seem a little controlling and a little overly nosy but she's doing this from a place of love. She wants to stay with you. She wants to remain attached with you. This is the difference between prodependence and codependence. Codependence, as you mentioned, is a trauma model. It looks at the betrayed partner's trauma. You're traumatized. This is why you're with that horrible addict. If you weren't so traumatized, you would have picked somebody better. Just wrong. And even if it's right, you love the person, you don't want to leave them. Or if you're a parent and it's your child who's suffering, you can't leave your child. I mean, you got to care for your child. So prodependence is a lovely attachment-based model, which views attachment as a strength and says, hey, look at you. You're trying to stay connected. You're a hero for trying to stay connected, despite everything your partner has done to you. And I always want the addicts to understand your wife is working very, very hard to feel safe enough to stay with you. I mean, all of this stuff that feels like an attack to you sometimes is not. It's her desperate attempt to continue loving you. I always tell them when she stops with all this stuff, you're in trouble. Then it's done. She's given up. So as long as you're still having conflict, it's actually a good sign. I mean, conflict, not fun. And prodependence, the stuff you're talking about, the self-care skills and the emotional regulation, all of that, it's learning how to love an addict in a way that's better and more helpful and more effective, and also to take better care of yourself at the same time. This is such a beautiful, I think, approach to healing, and it's so different than what we were doing, as few as 5 or 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. I mean, most therapists were using the codependency model, which was really blaming and shaming, and it drove people away. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, a lot of them are still, married to that model. But lots of forward-thinking people like yourself and pretty much everybody at Family Strategies, I think, is in on codependence or prodependence at this time.
Yeah, and we were really the first group out there that took prodependence and applied it right in a therapeutic setting, especially in a group setting, which has been so awesome. And you're right. I wish that if the addict partner could just understand that anything the betrayed partner is doing is because they really do love. They love
Yeah.
them. And they want to make sure that the connection can somehow repair, or that they can reestablish connection even in that moment.
Yeah.
And so they do sometimes some behaviors that are less than healthy. We call them the safety seeking. But if you could just kind of shift your lens and understand your partner really does care, right? And so even when you do disclose, or something, and your partner goes off, it's not because they're crazy and they're somehow not stable. It's because in that moment they're in crisis, because they're feeling like they're not connected any longer. So I love that. I love how it deshames the recovery process for both.
Yeah. And you mentioned the word crisis several times. I mean, betrayed partners, particularly on D-Day or any other disclosure, whether it's triple truth or interrogation or that mystery or the drive-bys or the dump, which is also horrid. It creates a fresh crisis. And staggered disclosure, death by paper cut, whatever we want to call it, is the worst, because it's a new crisis every time one little thing is uncovered. The betrayed partner is thrown back into the whole pain of discovery, and wondering, is this finally it? It's probably not fun. The fear is, that fight, flight, freeze. You can't help but launch back into that full force. It's not even like, oh, it's a little discovery, so you'll only go into it a little. You don't go into it a little. You go into it full force, and you're in a crisis. And one of the things I try to explain to the addicts is people in a crisis might look crazy, because they're in crisis. We don't make our best decisions in crisis, because we're panicked. We're in fight, flight, freeze mode. How can we make good decisions? How can we behave like a rational human being? We're not at that moment. So yeah, we've got some questions in the Q&A. We should get to those. Okay. Is there anything you want to add before we do that?
No, I think that's all wonderful. Thank you for adding.
Okay. Yeah. So hello to both of you. Hi. My husband had a relapse last week after a few other relapses since our formal disclosure 4 years ago. He has a CSAT, a sponsee, and goes to 5 SA meetings every week. He waited a month to tell me about the relapse. The last relapse was a 2-year-long relapse. I am not okay with him waiting a month to tell me. I think he is lying about a lot of stuff. Is it okay to have a boundary at this point to ask not to be told now about slips and relapses? I feel he's a huge liar. So kind of a lot packed into that.
There is a lot there. So let me go to the first question you asked that I see in there, and that is it okay to have a boundary at this point to ask not to be told about his slips and relapses? Absolutely. You can have a boundary around that, and you can put that into place immediately, because that's creating safety. So when we look at boundaries, and we're going to put any boundary in place, remember, the whole goal of a boundary is to create safety for you. So when you feel safe, then you're not having to struggle so much with staying regulated and staying in your body and out of crisis. So that might be a very appropriate boundary to set at this point. In addition to, down the road, some additional boundaries. So my recommendation is you're going to have to sit down and do some work on what it is you need. So you've got to look at your relational needs. One of the things we do, and some of the work we do in group, is having the betrayed partners identify what are your relational needs. And so we look at what are your physical needs relationally, what are your emotional needs, what are your spiritual needs, even you could put down what are your safety needs. So come up with some categories. And in this situation with a husband who's having relapses, it sounds like he is doing some recovery work. And there are relapses that do occur, or slips that do occur. And of course, the addict has to decide, where you place the slip, whether it's a bottom line or it's one leading up to the bottom lines. But the point is when they do have a slip, that in their recovery, they're open, honest, and transparent about it so that they come to their partner and they report it. Family Strategies, we only give them 12 hours. I know there's other places that are more generous and give them 24, but 12 hours, we've discovered that if you have 24, between that 12th hour and the 24th hour, lots of times the addicts can talk themselves out of it and rationalize their way to not disclosing. And so that's going to be something you might put in your needs, that if you have a slip from now on, you've got to report it to me within 12 hours, and even give some guidelines on to how you want them to present it to you. I had one of my clients share with me recently the fact that I've realized that I don't want him calling me on the phone as he's driving home from work and sharing with me a slip that he had the day before. When he shares with me, I want him to do it in person, right? So I told him that that's one time when he can go outside that rule just a little bit. But he's got to do it, in person where I can see him, because for her, it's like when I see him, I can tell if he's really being honest. I get this intuitive sense. So I would go through, identify what are your needs, your safety needs in this relationship. He did formal disclosure 4 years ago, but it seems like he's had a lot of behaviors and things happening since then. So one of the needs you might have if you are working on repairing this relationship and wanting to stay in the relationship is it might be that you require another therapeutic formal disclosure so that you know where you're at, and that can be a reset point. But in addition, boundary work. So we take relational needs, and I also make the, I don't make them, I assist my, my clients and the group members in coming up with their rights, because you have a right as a betrayed partner. Like, you have a right to total transparency and honesty. You have a right when you're in relationship with an addict to be told when they've had a slip within 12 hours, and then putting the boundary in place. Now, boundaries, I know the addicts will feel like they are punitive and they're controlling. And if you use the talking boundary, it's a great way to set a boundary in a very healthy way. And the boundary is about safety. So a lot of times the consequence of a boundary, right? We've got to have a boundary, we've got to have a consequence. The consequence is I can't be close to you because you keep violating the boundaries that I have in place. So another thing that you may need to do is some boundary work. I'm hoping you have a therapist or you have a group that you go to. I would encourage you to work with them on identifying some specific boundaries around this. And it might be that we're not sleeping in the same bedroom, right? Or in different parts of the house because it's not safe for me to be close to you, to share a physical space with you. It could be that there's not going to be any physical contact or sexual contact until I, the betrayed partner, feel safe again. And I have a right to determine when that is. I don't have to put a day, or a week limit on it, whatever that is. It's all about safety. So you've got lots of different things to do, lots of work to do on your own to create your safety, because that really is going to have to be something you do. But yes, I believe your starting point is to ask not to be told about slips and relapses, determine if you want to redo another therapeutic formal disclosure, and then work on boundaries that you can put into place. So along the way, he's not going, weeks or months without telling you.
Thank you. Next one here. Can you please help me by telling me how to get out of reactivity when he doesn't get the importance of consistency, keeping his word, or hearing me? I can't seem to get through.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like you're fighting for connection. You're fighting for understanding. You're fighting for empathy. I really want you to understand how important this is for me, because I really want this to work for the two of us. And so what I tell my clients to do is, if you find your brain is in that hijack mode, so that's the reactivity you're talking about, you have got to take a pause. And I know in that moment, your brain is telling you, no, we've got to get this done. We've got to fight for this. I've got to make sure he understands. The problem is that you're in that limbic part of your brain and there's no logic or reasoning there. You're highly emotional. So you're probably not even going to remember a lot of what happens in that moment. So the timeout or the pause is in that moment. You're going to share with your partner, right now I'm very reactive. I need to take some time to step away to figure out what's going on and to identify my needs. And then I'm going to come back in 20 minutes if you can regulate fast, in an hour, later tonight at the kitchen table, first thing in the morning, but within 24 hours, you come back. I tell my clients, you've got to learn that in that reactive moment, there is a point of choice. And you can choose in that moment to call the pause, slow it down, and get grounded. So one of the best things I heard in this last group, one of the last groups I had, was somebody said, I used to go in and just say things right away. And she goes, now I'm learning, I get my journal out and I write out what I need to say. And then she said, and I sleep on it. And then I take my journal with me to my addict partner and I literally read everything I've written, because she's using the 4 points of the talking boundary. And all of a sudden she says, he hears that because I'm calm, I'm grounded, I'm making logical sense. And he goes, oh, okay, yeah, I can do that. And that's what she reported. And I thought, that's wonderful. So when we're reactive, even though we don't want to, we have to choose to slow it down. Really get logical, identify what's going on, use the talking boundary, come back together when you're grounded, where you can respond.
I love this next question because I get it from the guys all the
Mm-hmm.
time. And this time it's coming from the wife. How do you handle going to the beach? My husband is in recovery for more than 2 years. He says he doesn't have a problem with the beach because he doesn't objectify women anymore. However, I still get triggered. What can I do to help myself with that? The beach has always been my happy place and I want to enjoy it with him. I want you to enjoy it with him too, Debbie. You're
Yes,
on.
okay, this one comes up all the time. Okay, so depending on the couple, some couples are in couples therapy. And I encourage them to go into their couples session and come up with a plan of action together so we understand. And it's true, your partner may not be objectifying women anymore. As a betrayed partner, I want to know, how are you doing that? I'm curious, what are your tools you're using? Are you using the 3-second rule? Are you fast forwarding? Those are all terms that they use to kind of not stay fixated on a thought that comes into your mind. Are they using injunctions? Are they using the stop sign? Those are all techniques that the addicts are taught to use so that they don't do that objectification. So when they're out and about and there's women on the beaches in bikinis, right? They're not paying attention. So check in with your husband and find out what his plan is so So you're just not taking his word for it. Have him help you understand. The same thing is you've got to do some of the same thing he does, which means that you might have to do that 3-second rule. And the minute you start thinking about your husband's looking at that woman, you change your thoughts and you go into your compassionate self-compassion statement, or you go into, tapping. I teach tapping all the time to help get out of, reactions to difficult situations. Or maybe you need to just have maybe even a word with your partner that says, hey, I'm a little bit dysregulated right now, reassure me that, we're safe. I would also pick and choose the beach I go to carefully. I've noticed that there's, you run into different things at different beaches, but I think if the two of you can come up with a plan of action for when you go, you also have your tools that you've put together. So when you get triggered, and it might mean you don't look at the girls in bikinis either, just like you don't want your husband to. Might be that you do the stop sign in your mind, so you stop the thoughts, or the 3-second rule, meaning you won't ponder or focus or fixate on anything for more than 3 seconds. So use some of your own tools. And if you can just really integrate the tools you're learning in that moment, I think you're going to find that the triggers become less and less and less. That's what I've experienced, with the betrayed partners I work with.
Yeah, and I just want to read the last sentence again because I think it's lovely. The beach has always been my happy place and I want to enjoy it with him. Talk about prodependence. I want to enjoy it with my husband.
Mm-hmm. I love it. So also plan some activities for the two of you to do at the beach, some real connecting activities. You guys might even want to go down to the beach at night when people aren't in bikinis and just spend some time down there, right? Listening to the water and the two of you together. So think about that. Maybe you guys want to take and carve out a special time where you go down and share thoughts, or, just connection questions or things like that. So I do love that. I make that your happy place again. So be very intentional, have a plan of action, plan activities so that you have a positive outcome.
Yeah. Okay, next one. How do you get someone to work on his recovery? My husband will start things for recovery, but not continue. He went to therapy a few times and quit. Started an online group for addicts, doesn't do the work or join the group calls. I'm at my wit's end and ready to ask him to move out. So
that shows up, and that's a hard place for you to be. So I just want to recognize that you're in a very, very difficult situation, and it's not an easy answer. A lot of the women I've worked with who are in your situation, it's a process of trying to figure out what to do. And a lot of them will work on really checking in and having a clear understanding of what they need to see their addict partner doing so that it looks like they're in recovery. Now, a few webinars ago, I kind of went through and talked about, 12 signs that would indicate your partner is doing their recovery work. So you might want to go back and look at those 12 different indicators. There's more, but I just identified 12. And if they're not there and you've been very clear in your boundaries around that and they're still choosing not to do recovery, then you may have to make a very difficult decision. I've got people I'm working with now that are trying to figure out how to do that. And so sometimes they will put a boundary around the time. And did you have something else to say? They might have to put just a boundary around how much time, they're going to give their partner to do recovery. You might need to share using that 4-point talking boundary, what recovery would look like for you, what the experience is like for you when you don't see him doing recovery. And then you're going to have to put the consequence in place. So that's very, very difficult. And as you as a partner, I tell the betrayed partners, you've got to work on yourself then. If your addict partner is choosing not to do their own recovery, then you need to begin focusing on doing your own. Really create your support system and get those people around you that can support you, because you may have to make some hard decisions. But along the way, make sure that as you're doing this, that you are communicating your needs with your partner who's not choosing to do recovery. It's very, very important that you do that you don't keep this all to yourself and then all of a sudden, you're kicking him out of the house because he's not doing his recovery work. So I really encourage you to do the communication. So anyway, so Scott has stepped away and I'm going to go ahead and read the next question. And this is it. I had a 24-hour rule, but he took a month. Said he told his sponsee and that his sponsee didn't say to tell me. So this must have been from the previous person we talked about. Game over. He doesn't get to tell me when he wants. My needs aren't being met in this relationship. I stay for financial reasons and help with a disabled child. So let me circle back around. So Scott, there was an additional kind of some clarification from a previous question. And so I know your needs aren't being met in the relationship, probably emotional needs and obviously some relational needs. But like you said, those financial reasons and help with a disabled child, those are some of the hard reasons that we have to choose to stay in a relationship. And I want to just validate how difficult that is. So what I will do with the trade partners I'm working with is we try to focus on, from a resiliency standpoint, how can you stay within this very difficult relationship? Right? Because you need to financially, you need to because you've got this concern for your child. And so how can we help you stay grounded? And how can you reach out to other people to have your needs met? Oftentimes, the betrayed partners would like their addict partners to meet all their needs. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen. And so it's really important that you have that support system that you can reach out to. You didn't say whether or not you're doing any recovery work. I would hope that you are. I hope that you have a therapist that can assist you with that. So anyway, Scott, did you have anything else to add on addicts who aren't doing recovery work, and what do you do as the partner?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a tough one because, you can't recover for somebody. I can want you to get well so much, but I can't do it for you. It's up to the addict. And all a betrayed partner can really do is, get the support that she or he needs and set boundaries and stick to them. And after that, the addict has to do his work or not. I've seen addicts who pay it lip service and don't do the work ever. But I also see guys start out that way, and then something clicks and they get it, and they start doing the work. So it's just a tough one. I always, it's painful to hear those questions because we see it. It's real.
We do. It is very real, and it's a struggle. And I wish there was a black and white answer to this. There's not. It's like I tell the betrayed partners I work with, there's a lot of gray here. And there's new territory, but there's also a lot of gray. And oftentimes when we're in crisis, right, and we're having betrayal trauma, we really have a lot of black and white thinking, right? It's got to be this or nothing else. And so to get to that place of it's not ideal, that situation, the previous person whose husband is not in recovery and isn't continuing it, those are less than ideal situations. And so think about how often you're kind of thrown back into crisis, and about the only thing you can do is take care of yourself in those moments and just navigate it one day at a time. But the only way I see you navigating it with a little more ease is with the help of people who can understand and have that professional knowledge on how to help you do it. It's so hard. It's very hard.
Yeah. Last one. Thank you so much. I've set clear boundaries. He does not honor them. I'm getting help for myself. I belong to a group and you seek. Yeah. So you've set your boundaries. He doesn't honor them, but you're getting support for yourself, and you're doing what you can do. And I'm sad that he's not doing what he can do. But
that's a very difficult thing. I know that once we get women out of kind of that crisis, right, and we're getting stabilization, one of the next things they do want to work on is boundaries. I'm finding that's a real big need for the betrayed partner. And they have a difficult time because they never learned how to do boundaries, possibly as a child. Of course, discovery and disclosure of your partner's addiction, whether it's drugs addiction, sex or porn, it's, such a violation of your boundaries, that you thought you had within the marriage. And so it's a struggle, though. I find that it is a process. And so I would encourage those of you that have asked today, about how do I handle my partner not doing recovery, the way they should be doing recovery, is really tune in to what your relational needs are. Check in, have clarity on that, understand that you have a right for that, to have a healthy, safe, secure relationship, and then take that and turn it into boundaries. And lots of times I'll tell my clients, a boundary, you don't have to sit down and read a list of boundaries to your partner. Oftentimes it's just that in that moment you can tell, hey, I have a boundary in place for this, either for myself or for the other person. So in the moment, I'm going to execute that boundary. So let me give you an example. If I were in a conversation I'm a betrayed partner, and I'm in a conversation with my addict partner, and he starts criticizing how he's seeing me, the betrayed partner, do my recovery, one of the things that I might do would be simply just put my hand up and say to that addict partner, I need to take a pause right here, and I want to put a boundary in place. And that is, you're not allowed to criticize how I'm doing my recovery, because I'm doing the best I know how to do. I'm doing it differently than you. And I don't criticize the way you do your recovery. So I don't want to move close to you when you criticize me. In fact, I want to kind of pull away. So today I might be a little more distant because I feel criticized, and I want you to be aware of that. So in the moment, we can set boundaries. So like I said, we've got to have clarity on what we're trying or what we need. And we also have to have a consequence. So it's very, very difficult. And I want you to know that I do see that oftentimes we want to get through, betrayal trauma recovery like we are, like the hare, the race, I think, of the tortoise and the hare. We want to really rush through it because we just want it to be over with. And the unfortunate thing is, It's more like we have to take on the attitude of the tortoise and just be slow and steady in the things that we do and in our own recovery. So one of the best books that I've seen recently is Set Boundaries, Find Peace. And there's a great workbook. So if you are somebody who is struggling with setting boundaries, that might be a great place to start. One of the things I see showing up with boundaries is that it's really hard once you have put that consequence in place, and it's to hold on to and maintain the consequence and live in the discomfort of what you have to do, when you actually are holding on to your word and what you've said the consequence is going to be. So anyway, I just reviewed how to do boundaries in the moment.
Good deal. Sorry, I have landscapers here today, and they have,
you and I both, right?
They have lots of questions. We're actually doing like hardscape, so they want to check on every little thing, which is great actually, but has made it hard to teach today. So anyway, we're out of time anyway. So thank you everybody for being here. Debbie, thank you. It's always great to see you. I'm glad I got to fill in today.
Thank you.
And I'll see you again soon. I'm sure everybody else, Matt Wheeler is off next Friday, but Debbie will be back 2 weeks, and then Matt will be here the week after that. So we'll see you then.
Okay, bye everybody.
See you everybody.